In this lesson, I'd like to show you how to connect a mesh object, that is your character, to an actual armature. Now, this is just going to be a basic overview of how it all works, as we're not quite ready to get stuck into the nitty-gritty of things just yet. But now I just want to focus on the methods of connecting the mesh to the armature, and we'll look at weight painting and actually building the armature and some of the other gotchas with rigging in other videos. Now, there's actually 3 ways to connect a mesh to an armature. However, one could argue that there's actually only 2, because the first option that I'm going to mention is actually used in both of the other 2 options. But I mentioned it here to try and give you a good understanding of how it all works inside Blender. So those 3 options are object parenting. This is where we parent the mesh object directly to the armature object on the container level. Next, we have bone parenting. This is where you parent the mesh object directly to one of the bones inside the armature object. Now, if you needed to do any type of bending, twisting, squash, and stretch, those 2 options probably won't work for you. You need to use the 3rd option, which is the armature modifier. Now, this will use either the bone envelopes or the vertex group that you set up to move your vertices in any particular way that you want them to articulate. Now, with this method, each bone that you actually want to deform the mesh will actually need to be set to deform. Now, this is something that is enabled by default when you create a bone. So it's something you find yourself turning off on the bones that you actually don't want to participate in the deformation rather than turning it on. But let's jump into Blender. The first option, we're going to be working on the object or container level. So we're just going to parent our mesh object to our armature object. And you'll see this is only part of the solution for when we actually connect our characters or our rig to our characters. So the way that we do that, and the way that I would suggest that you do it, is by using the keyboard shortcut. And there's a specific order that you need to select the objects in. So first of all, we select the child, and then we shift select the parent. That is the way that you do it. So you have the parent selected last. And then we bring up our menu with Control P, and we'll be looking at these first 3 options in this lesson, and we'll be looking at the other ones in a different lesson. So the one that I want you to choose now is object. So now what we've done is when we grab this armature object, our mesh object, our cube, is going to follow along. However, if we jump into pose mode, where, as you've learned, is where we do all our beautiful animation, and we move around our bone, it's not going to follow. So this is only parenting on the object level. And before I go on and show you all the intricacies of that, I want to show you some other ways that we can actually parent. So you've just seen the keyboard shortcut where we select the child first, and then we shift select the parent and press Control P. That is one way of doing it. Now just clear our parent object, because down here in the object tab, you see we've got a relations tab, and this is where the parent lives. So we can actually see what the parent is here. So I'm going to click that to clear it. I could have cleared it with Alt P. Let me just undo that. So we've got our parent back and show you. So I have my mesh selected, and I'm going to hit Alt P and then clear the parent. And we also get a little menu here. So I'm just going to choose the top one for now, and I'll show you the other ones in a few minutes. All right, so back at square one. So another way to parent this is by selecting the eyedropper and then just choosing the object that you want to parent to. So we go click, there we go. So now we've added that armature object in there. I'll just clear that again and show you the last final way that we can actually parent this. And that is by clicking in here and bringing up the list of all the objects in our scene, or we can actually start typing. Although in this scene, there's only one other object, so you can only select that one object there. So they are the 3 different ways that you can add your parenting, but I'll come back to that in a moment. But for now, I want to bring up this parent type menu. And you've got 3 options in here, but I actually only think there should be 2. So what we've just done then is the object level parenting, which is what we'll be looking at mostly. And then the other way is the bone parenting, where we're parenting it to one of the bones inside that object. Now the armature type parent, I'm not actually sure why this is here. I think it's an old feature that's it doesn't work the way that you expect it to work. And I would suggest just avoiding that one altogether. It's not even in the documentation as to what the armature parent type does different to the other ones, or actually it just doesn't work the way that you expect it to. All right, so let's have a look at some of the differences between those methods of parenting when things aren't at 0, 0, 0. So we parented that, everything was at 0. So that's good. I'm just going to unparent it. And let's just move our armature object over here. And now let's use the keyboard shortcut. So select our child, shift select our parent, then hit Control P. And you'll notice that we've got a relationship line. You can probably see that. It's a really tiny little line connecting it, saying these now are in a relationship, a child-parent relationship. If you wanted to turn that off, you can actually go up here and then just disable this relationship lines. Now it was there when we parented it before, but because it was in the same spot, you couldn't see that relationship line. So I think when you're a beginner, it's helpful to have these relationship lines on. But then when you become more of an expert, you can turn it off, because it's just information that gets in your way. It clutters up your view having all these lines everywhere. But I will leave that on for now. So you'll notice that our when we parented it that way, our cube stayed in the same spot. Let me just unparent it. I'm going to parent it with our menu over here. So if I actually use the eyedropper, or if I type in the list here, it's working exactly the same way. But I'm just going to use the eyedropper for now. And I want you to watch what happens with our cube. Boom, our cube has moved. Now, why has it moved? That is because when you apply the parent in this way, using either the list method or the eyedropper method, it doesn't apply the parent inverse matrix. Now, that sounds pretty technical, but basically all it means is it doesn't apply the instructions to stop it from jumping around. And that's what the parent inverse matrix is. It's the information of the differences between the 2 locations. So it knows, hey, I've got to jump backwards this way to stay in the same spot. Now, if I clear the parent, you'll see that the object jumps back to where it thought it was, which is our transforms up here, which is 0, 0, 0. So let me just undo that and show you. If I clear the parent but keep the transforms, boom, you'll notice that our locations up here have changed. So it is now no longer parented, but it's in a new location. So that's what the keeping the transforms does. I'm just going to reset this back to 0, and I'll show you with the keyboard one way of getting it to jump to that location with the menu here. If you choose this option here, it will apply the parent inverse matrix. If we choose this one here, it's going to keep the deformation, which is basically the same as this one. But if we apply this one without the inverse, you'll notice that it jumps. So we go bang, jump. So that is exactly the same way as applying it over here. Now, all this jumping around in the parent inverse matrix is one of the reasons why we always want to have our rig at 0, 0, 0 and our mesh at 0, 0, 0. It makes things much easier because there is no parent inverse matrix because it is the same. It's not going to jump around at all, even if you apply it or if you don't, because it's in the same position. Now, if we did happen to parent with the offset here and we wanted to get rid of it, we can actually clear it with the clear parent inverse, and you'll notice that it jumps across and we haven't gotten rid of any of our parenting there. So now we're going to do some parenting on the bone level. So I've just reset everything. We're back to square one. This mesh object does not have a parent at all. And the way that we do that, I'll show you the keyboard shortcut way first. We first select our mesh, then we shift select our armature object. And before we go any further, we jump into pose mode. So we jump into pose mode, and then we make sure that we select an active bone. So that is the bone that we want to do the parenting to. And then we enable our little menu here. So I just hit Control P, and the options that we're going to look at here, we've got bone and we've got bone relative. And they work almost the same way, and I'll show you the differences in just a moment. But for now, we're just going to choose bone. Now, when we actually grab and move this bone around in pose mode, it's going to follow along. And when we jump into object mode and move it around, the actual whole container is going to follow along. So this is an excellent solution when we just want one mesh to follow along with one bone without any bending or twisting or deformation at all. This is a really quick and easy way to do that. It's going to follow along with that specific bone that you've parented it to. Let's have a look in our relationship tab down here. So we've got our armature is the parent level, but you can see we're not at the object level, we're at the bone level here. And this is the name of our bone here. So I'm going to do the same thing with our options over here. So I'm going to choose our object. I'm going to just choose armature here. And I'm going to change this from parent type object to parent type bone. And we get an extra item here saying what is the name of the bone that you want to parent it to. And in this armature, there's only one bone, and it happens to be called bone. So we're going to choose that one. And you saw it jump around, and that is because of the whole parent inverse matrix. So that's why I would suggest just using the keyboard shortcut, because you don't need to worry about all this jumping around. Okay, so what is the difference between straight bone parenting and bone relative parenting? Well, so I'm going to parent this again. So I'm going to start by selecting our cube, shift selecting our armature, jump into pose mode, select our bone to make it active, then hit Control P, choose our bone again. Now I am showing you that one again, just so that you get used to that option. But now you notice if we move this around, scale it to whatever, the whole mesh object is going to follow along. However, if we jump into edit mode and reposition this bone wherever we want, sometimes we do this in rigging, we have something already parented and then we need to move it around, and then we jump back into pose mode, you'll notice that our mesh has followed along. Now, if we just undid that, I'll just jump back a few steps, and if we had chosen the bone relative option, I'm going to select the mesh, select the armature, jump into pose mode, Control P, and choose bone relative. Notice it works the same way, although when I jump into edit mode and I move this bone and position it over here, say I'll scale it or whatever, and then jump back into pose mode, this mesh object that was parented to that isn't going to move from the position that it started with. So that is the difference between the bone parenting and the bone relative parenting. Now, the final way to connect our mesh to the armature is by using an armature modifier. This is a solution that you'll need if you want it to bend or deform or twist in any other way other than just following along straight with a bone. So I'll give you an overview of how this all works, but later in the course, we'll actually go ahead and do this silly example that I've got here just to teach you all these things in action. All right, so I've got a 3-bone armature here. It's displaying in the envelope mode, which is why it looks like it is. And to attach this, we do it in a very similar way. We just choose a different option. So I've selected my mesh here. I'm going to shift select our armature object, hit Control P, and then I'm going to choose one of these options here. And just explain what they do. The armature deformation is going to set up the parenting. It's going to add the armature modifier, and that is it. If we choose the empty groups option here, it's going to go one step further, and it's going to look at our armature here, and every bone that is set to deform, it's going to create a vertex group on our mesh with that same name. But it's not actually going to weight anything, it's just going to create those names for us. Now, the last two options are going to be the automatic weighting. So the automatic envelopes is going to do all those things, but it's going to weight those vertex groups with the envelopes from our edit mode. So you can see at the moment the envelopes are the same in edit mode and pose mode. And remember, the ones in edit mode are the ones where you're setting up your armature, and the ones in pose mode is where you're animating it. So it's going to take the data from the actual edit mode. But that is not a very good option for something like this. The best option would be to actually use the automatic weights. And what that does is use Blender's internal algorithm to try and weight the whole entire mesh to the bones that you have. So we're going to choose that option in this example. So we're going to go automatic weights. And now you can see if we move this around, it has set up the parenting. And if we jump into pose mode, you can see that it's going to move along with it. Although you can see it's tried to do its best, but this is not the best result for something like this. Now later in the course, we'll go ahead and improve this. But for now, that is the quick way to set up your armature modifier. So that was a quick way of setting up your armature modifier to connect it to your mesh. Now, there's a lot more to learn about the armature modifier, and we will dig into it a little bit later on. And I particularly like to show you the long way of setting it up for those cases where things go wrong, or for those cases where you just need to do something manually. You'll have a better understanding of how everything works so you can solve any problem that you come across. And that's all for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.